Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm going to be continuing my lecture on the materialization arc and how it manifests in humanity and in society today. So if you're new to my channel, you haven't seen the first few lectures, I will link those below. You probably are going to want to watch those because you're kind of joining midstream if this is the first one you're watching. If not, let's continue on this journey in understanding the human form, in understanding our process, and really transitioning between the materialization arc of development, which really was a huge part of the Lemurian impulse and the Atlantean impulse. That was the cosmic overarching point of those societies, of those epochs. So we're looking into what that was, what is the materialization impulse, what is the materialization arc, and what is the spiritualization arc, and how do we recognize them in society. Namely, today, really focusing on what happens when an individual is trapped in the mindset and the impulse of the prior stage of human development. So as I've stated many times on my channel, human beings evolve through metamorphosis. And there really is no human creation because humans were not created. You know, humans have existed with the Earth through all of her phases of development in the solar system. And we have metamorphed into matter, and we will also go through a metamorphosis out of matter. And our journey and fall into matter and rise out of matter is the basis and core of every genuine esoteric teaching in society. You know, if you want to look at what a mystery school is, or what a religion is, or what a true esoteric tradition is, it is helping humanity evolve. That's what spirituality is. Spiritual evolution is helping us to actually complete these stages of metamorphosis that we need to actually exist, to actually move and evolve with the planet, with the cosmos, and the life wave of humanity. That's what all of this is about. It's not about, you know, having wisdom really, or power or anything. It's literally being able to place ourselves in time correctly, to understand what epoch we are in right now, and use that information to become an active participant in our own life so that we can evolve eventually with the earth into a higher form. In anthroposophy, this is called New Jupiter. In the New Age, it would be called, you know, like 5D Earth or the higher Earth. It's also known as the Ascension, things like this. You know, why we're even talking about Ascension and 5D and all of this kind of stuff is because it's metamorphosis. It is the literal metamorphosis of our form from one condition to the other, which is the basis of every single esoteric. That's the point of every single mystery school, is to help us go through these metamorphoses, which are basically initiations. This is it. This is why we're here. So it's very important that we understand the phase of development that we are in, so that we can evolve with the sun, we can evolve with the life wave of the planet. Okay, so in my last lecture, I was talking about, you know, a lot about what happens when we don't understand time, when we don't understand the epoch that we're in, and we think that we're in a materialization phase still, when we're in a spiritualization phase. So what does that look like? What does it look like when you're out of time? What does it look like when you're not in, when you're existing in the post-Atlantean epoch, which is the beginning of the spiritualization arc, really? But you're still, every part of you is still expressing and hooked up to spiritually the prior phases of development. So you're in the spiritualization phase, but you're still thinking and acting out as though you're in the materialization phase. What does that look like? What kind of thoughts do you think? What kind of actions do you take? What is your belief system like? Right? That's what we're going to get into today very deeply, is how do you function if you are trapped in the materialization arc during the time of spiritualization? Okay? So one of the impulses that you will have if you are trapped in that materialization mindset is that you are going to still think that you need to create a form to incarnate into. So during the Atlantean epoch and during the Lemurian epoch, which are the prior epochs to our own, humanity was manifesting its form. Humanity was creating its body. Now, this is talked about in shamanic traditions as entering the dream many times. They talk about a time period where they remember entering into this material world as being entering into the dream. In Christian esoterica, it's called the fall. We call it the fall. And this meant the fall from being really a spiritual form into matter. And the fall into matter is basically the reality that every spiritual component of you that exists is now sewn into the body. It's also, in the Western tradition, this could also be called being entombed in matter. And when you look at the mystery of Christ, which is the cornerstone of the spiritualization arc, you see Christ is locked in the tomb, but arises from the tomb. This is symbolic of us being entombed in matter, entombed in our body, our soul being entombed in our body, and entombed in the material plane, sewn into it after the Lemurian epoch and the Atlantean epoch, where we consciously weaved ourselves into this physical body and this physical plane so that we could experience individuality. And once we develop that individuality, we can then free ourselves from the tomb or resurrect or be reborn in a higher condition. So that's really what that mystery is, right? It is the mystery of materializing ourselves or entombing ourselves in matter, and the cultivating the ability to spiritualize or etherize ourselves out of matter. So again, you have the falling and descending in matter during the Lemurian epoch and during the Atlantean epoch, where our soul and our spiritual self, our astral body, our etheric body, all these spiritual bodies that we have become deeply dependent and interwoven and knitted into the physical form. They're inseparable. And now we have to work through transformation, through inner alchemy, to spiritualize our physical form. So that is the journey of the human being on Earth. And the Earth is also going through the same process. The Earth also descended into matter. And the next lectures in this series, I'm going to talk about the Earth's descent into matter and how the Earth did this by basically materializing different planetary streams, right? But the Earth is also descending into matter and physicalizing into an individual planet of its own, of itself. And so we're doing this journey with the Earth as well. We evolve with the Earth. But as has been a huge part of this lecture, we can get mixed up and we can think that we're still in the phase of sewing ourselves into matter, that we still need to create a form in order for our soul to funnel into. And this is exactly what certain people on the planet, and maybe yourself at certain times, believed. there are certain mindsets that are hangovers from Lemurian Atlantis in that materialization phase, where people still think that they have to create a form for their soul to enter. It's like they're stuck in it. And the reason being is because we really did do that. We really did have to create our physical form. That was real. We really did have to materialize the physical form that we have now. We had to do it through our own hard work. But it's like some people have not gotten the message. And it can manifest in a very extreme way, where people are now thinking that they have to create robots, cyborgs that they can upload themselves into a machine, and that the spiritualization ritual that is so keenly present in the Christian mysteries is actually the uploading yourself into a machine, is the abandoning the form into a machine. They don't understand the Christ impulse in this epoch.
When you watch somebody sitting in a room with maybe some goggles or maybe just with a screen all day, is he trapped inside this small room? Or is he or she, liberated into the immaterial realm of cyberspace, of the metaverse? And this theological battle from 2,000 years ago is now becoming a real battle about how human life would look like in coming generations, and what is the role of our bodies. I mean, are they important in any way? Or is the point to kind of release our mind or our soul from this to exist in an immaterial realm?
They still are trapped in the prior epoch and are like continuing on thinking that it's the same impulse. They don't realize that we are now in a spiritualization impulse and that something completely different is needed. It's sort of like, have you ever looked within your own being and realized that there's a part of your consciousness that is trapped in the past? And maybe it's when you were a child and you were punished or something terrible happened to you. And ever since you had that traumatic event, you were trapped in it. You were almost like entombed in it. And because you didn't understand what happened, and because you felt so betrayed, and because there was so much negativity around it, you froze. And it was such a shock to your system, and it was so terrible that it's taken over your being, it's taken over your mind, it's taken over your heart, and it's become a part of your personality. Maybe you don't want it to be there, but there's a part of you that's so traumatized that it's actually stuck in the past. It's not able to live in the present moment. And really, it's this past part of yourself, this damaged part of yourself that's taken over. And it's controlling your life. Have you ever had this experience? I know I have. I think in psychology, people call this living in a way where you're just reactive. You're just reacting all the time from a place of pain, almost like a robot. There isn't that flash where you're like, maybe I need to transform this. Maybe I need to start working upon this and turning this into something else and bringing myself into where I should be, bringing myself into this time. The only way we can really come into time correctly, or come into the epoch of our development, the current epoch, is through healing. It's through looking deeply within ourselves and freeing ourselves from the tomb. And this is really our task in this epoch, is to develop that self-awareness which in the early mysteries was being prepared for humanity by know thyself, know thyself, know thyself, know the parts of you that are present and that are not, because we don't want the parts of us that are damaged and abused and in trauma to take over our mind and to control us. We want to take those parts of us that are behind, that are trapped in the past. In this case, maybe we're talking about a different era of our life, like our childhood. We want to heal them. We want to bring them into this moment, and we want to be able to live in the present moment without being pulled back into that horrible experience. We don't want to be controlled by the person that experience made us, by that fear. And it's only the essence of Christ consciousness in our heart and of Christ that can transform that. Because that's the evolutionary impulse in the solar system. That's the evolutionary impulse of the human being. And so this happens actually within our soul too. It doesn't just happen in our life where we are abused or we are traumatized and we start getting stuck in that trauma and we start getting stuck in that time and we push it and we project it onto this time, we project it into our life. That doesn't just happen in childhood or, in past lives where we get stuck. Even in past life regression, you'll see these ailments manifesting. And it's to do with something horrible that happened to you in a past life that has not been transformed. And so it's holding you back. And there's literally a part of you that is like you're living in another time. It's like if you were burned as a witch in the 1600s or the 1700s and hung as a witch or something like that. And then you're coming into your life. And now whenever you try to speak, you get, your throat closes down or you start to feel like your skin is burning. Because there's a part of your soul and of your essence that is associating this moment with the past. And it is linked through trauma, and it is linked through not being healed. And so we have to bring our heart to that. We have to bring Christ to that. We have to bring that Christ essence that exists within our heart to that part of ourselves, to transform it. And that essence is also love. That essence is also compassion. But there's also Christ in that, which is the true transformational impulse of the cosmos. And when that enters us, we can transform and we can be in time correctly. But if we don't use that transformational essence of Christ, we will become trapped in the past. And we'll not be able to overcome these wounds that we have. And so this is exactly what happens on a larger scale within human beings, is that we carry all of these wounds from the prior epoch. And through essentially the epochs of the materialization phase, when we were just creating our bodies and our form, and everything was about materialization. Everything was about what is being created on the material plane. What kind of form do you have? We have to create a form so that we can incarnate into, otherwise we don't exist. So that impulse is still within people. And it was a traumatic event for those individuals. And maybe it's in us, inside all of us again. I have to speak about it as though it's a group in order for us to understand. But I also want to acknowledge that this exists in all of us to varying degrees, okay? But I'm going to talk about it in extremes just so that we can grasp it. I'm not trying to single anyone out, although I will single some people out because they just embody it so well. But my intention is understanding, and I want to be clear about that. So ultimately, there is this impulse that is now dark, that is now inverted for us, where these people feel like they need to create forms in order to exist. And they're also holding on to certain black magic traditions that existed in the Atlantean and Lemurian epoch that are based around the materialization process, where they act like gods and create forms for demonic entities to enter into. I'll say that one more time. There's also a kind of black magic, what we would consider black magic, that reached a peak in Atlantis, but that has been evolved and used ever since, especially in Sumeria. Okay? And that magic is about genetic manipulation. It's about hybridization. It's about the creation of forms, the messing around with DNA, intelligent design, to incarnate certain beings, certain kinds of souls on the planet, because it is part of their religion. So creating these forms for themselves to incarnate into, and also for the disincarnate, degenerate entities or demonic entities or archons that they worship to enter. Okay, a lot of modern day black magic is from the Atlantean epoch, from the materialization arc, and it is about creating forms, their own forms for themselves, which is, they believe, the body of God. It would be called Atman in anthroposophy, and even I believe in the Eastern traditions, which is the totally spiritualized God form that we reach in the Vulcan stage, or the complete angelic human. They think that's like a transhumanist form, okay, or a cyborg form that's indestructible. So there is a stream of consciousness and of inverted consciousness, degeneracy, that is forcing this darker tradition, this darker impulse from Atlantis into our present day. And we are coming right up against facing this again. We had to face it then, and we have to face it now. We cannot do that, ladies and gentlemen, unless we know what to look for. So stay with me, even though I know that this is a big topic. So we have certain groups on the planet that were present in Atlantis doing the same thing. It is a repeat. And what they're doing is wanting to modify the form, but ultimately they have a religion. And it's just, that kind of spirituality for them is just as real as your spirituality. You know, that they believe something different. Okay? But it's just as real for them. It may seem stupid to you. It may seem completely dumb to you. Like, how could somebody believe this? It's so stupid. It's so obvious to me. But they feel like that about people who are in line with the Christ stream and the spiritualization arc. They feel like that about us. They think we're crazy and we're stupid and we've got it wrong. They always have. They're of a different impulse. So it's important to understand that the thinking is not the same. These people are driven by the materialization arc, not the spiritualization arc. They're in the wrong stream developmentally. The Antichrist stream is what they're caught up in, which is why the Antichrist has been associated with technology and chips and things like that, is because even back then people knew. So one of the mindsets is that, oh my gosh, I must create forms. I must create forms for my spirit to enter into to survive. Sometimes it's that real harmonic impulse of preservation, and they want to live forever. Okay, this is just not understanding death, and it's not understanding birth. It's not understanding esoterica properly. It's a delusion, and it's a weird religious delusion. And so ultimately, they don't believe that we are in a spiritualization arc, or if they do, they've completely misunderstood what that is. And they don't think that we have to go inward take responsibility and spiritualize our physical form, they think that they have to create a new form and live forever in this new form, which is looking to be probably like some kind of robot. They'll probably mess around with intelligent design to the point that they create the highest genetic form they believe and then turn that into a robot or something. But that is how that Atlantean materialization impulse is manifesting today. Their desire is not to go inwards with Christ and spiritualize out of this plane using your own transformational power and alchemy. No, they think that their version of that is like uploading themselves into a cube. So this is a very different interpretation of esoteric literature and just different understanding of the epoch. Okay, another thing that happens when somebody is trapped in the old materialization ideology is that they also feel like they can modify the form, and through modifying the form, they feel like they can contain a higher spiritual being. So this is where you get into a lot of weird racism and prejudice and eugenics, is people thinking that the physical form that they have indicates their spiritual power or their value. And that's where all prejudice comes from. That's where all of the weird eugenics stuff comes from, is this belief that they have to have a certain form in order to hold a certain kind of spiritual force. And now this was a concern in Atlantis. It was a concern in Lemuria. In Lemuria and in Atlantis, during the materialization phase, when we were actually in that phase, we had to learn about materialization. We had to learn about creating forms. We had to learn about creating matter, because we were an astral presence that was really hovering above or just a little bit inside physicality. So we had to learn about how to physicalize ourselves, and we had to learn how to form and create with higher beings. Again, I'm not talking about genetic engineering here. I'm talking about through embodying certain spiritual forces, we had to ourselves learn how to form a physical body that would house us. And we wanted to be able to carry the most amount of our soul essence as possible, right? Okay. And so, yeah, there was a desire to create a physical form that could house a very powerful spiritual essence that was going to carry you through the spiritualization arc. So there was this thought during Lemuria and Atlantis, the consideration, the reality that you had to manifest a form for yourself that had the power to exist and survive in the material plane. So that was a very real consideration while we are in a materialization phase. Now that we are no longer in a materialization phase, that consideration doesn't exist anymore. We are sewn into our body. We are entombed in matter. We are in the physical plane. The earth is in the physical plane. The earth has reached peak materialization and is now beginning to rise. We are physical. You have physicalized. You are still a spiritual being. You still have an astral body. You have an etheric body. You are connected to higher planes, but you are sewn into your physical form. And the only way that we leave this physical form is through spiritual transformation and responsibility. and taking the development of our eye to work upon ourselves and to understand Christ in our heart and to use that Christ essence to transform ourselves. That's the only way that we spiritualize out of matter. And that has been the plan all along. Okay, so there's something different is needed out of us now. We cannot apply that mindset to today because we are not in that phase. Okay? But there's people that believe that they are. And they're still stuck. They still think that like they need to have a certain form. And if they don't have that form, that they're not going to be able to access certain spiritual forces. And so this is where you get a lot of very weird genetic engineering stuff and people sort of thinking that the material plane determines spiritual value or how spiritual someone is. Now, it hasn't been this way for a very long time. You could perhaps argue that in the Lemurian and Atlantean epochs, maybe there was the possibility of the physical form forming in a very distorted way. Edgar Cayce talks about this very clearly in his Atlantis readings, about how some people were manifesting forms that were deformed and how there were masters that had to help humanity, that helped, and very high initiates that helped these people work upon their form in something called the Temple Beautiful that would help to get rid of those deformations. So there was the potential of creating sort of this more deformed body, but there were temples and ways in which you could begin to heal that through, again, not genetic modification, not direct anything. It was always done primarily through introducing the proper energy to you through initiation, and then you learning how to mirror that and embody that, and that would change your form. Okay, so ultimately there was a whole thing with this, and it's manifesting today as people still functioning subconsciously in that way and thinking that if they can just have the form that they want, if they can just look how they think they should look, that they can have that kind of spiritual power. But it doesn't really make sense today because we know that our power is inside of us. Our power is within, and we've known that for a long time now. Our transformational power is within ourselves. It doesn't matter what your form looks like. We're not in that phase anymore where we're materializing a form and we've got to work upon it and understand what it means and all this kind of stuff. We're literally done with that now. And we're now on a phase of inner transformation and healing that just spiritualizes our form out of this plane. Totally different thing, okay? And this also gets into a lot of hangovers that was going on between as the era was transforming from the Atlantean age and epoch into the post-Atlantean epoch. There was a weird transformation where we did not yet have the incarnation of Christ, but we were beginning to enter the spiritualization phase. And so we're still kind of messing around with that. And you can see these holdovers from Atlantis and Lemuria, mainly Atlantis. And part of that is intense tribalism. So during the Atlantean era and the end of Atlantis, there was an intense desire to preserve something called blood memory. And I will link below some of the lectures and anthroposophy on blood memory. But blood memory is basically the reality that your blood contains all of the wisdom of your ancestors. And there was an idea that if you messed up your blood by interbreeding with someone that wasn't of your tribe, and I'm not even talking about races here or like racial intermingling, I'm talking about just within even the same tribe, the same race technically, but even within the same even within the same tribes of one race. So the different groups and races were like this as well. So what was happening was that everybody up until the incarnation of Christ was extremely concerned about blood memory, and they wanted to keep their blood only with certain individuals that they believed were part of their tribe. And the idea was that if too much different blood was introduced, that they would no longer have power because there was too much of a competing influence in the blood for them to access the knowledge and wisdom of their ancestors and also the egregores that were surrounding their tribe. And so it's not just like the royal family that was obsessed about breeding. Most tribes and cultures also have their own ideas about preserving blood memory. It wasn't even like, oh, my tribe is better than your tribe or something. It was the core of it was that you wanted to be able to access the egregores of your particular tribe and your particular blood family. And you also wanted to be able to access that ancestral wisdom. And if the blood became mixed too much, to too intense of a degree, that it would be like you wouldn't be able to access anything. Because the human being at that time was in a transition phase between the Atlantean epoch and how Atlantis was functioning, which was more about the form, and then the incarnation of Christ, which is the freedom from the form. So there were, like this, you can even see this with the idea of arranged marriage. And looking back even in First Nations traditions where they had certain people that they believed to be royalty, and certain tribes would only commingle with others and definitely not with some. This was all about preserving their blood memory. It wasn't necessarily, again, about superiority in these cases. It was about wanting to be able to go into a trance or a psychic state and be able to fully access everything that was in your blood. And so that is where a lot of the tribalism comes from. It really is a hangover from Atlantis, when the form was really important and the blood was really, really, really important. Now, like any kind of metamorphosis and transformation, it's not like blood memory isn't in existence anymore, or it's not important. There still is such a thing as blood memory. You can ask anyone who is, Celtic, and they can have an ancestral connection to Ireland or to Scotland or to the UK. They may be able to go there and access certain information or memories that literally is within their blood, right? The same thing with a First Nations person. They may go to a certain area in America, and they may get something from the land, and they may be able to, their blood may work with the land and with themselves and with the cosmos in a different way than someone that does not have that blood memory. So it's not that we don't have blood memory. It's not that we don't use it. It's not that it doesn't benefit us. It's that since the incarnation of Christ 2,000 years ago, we don't function as a tribe anymore. We don't function tribally anymore. We function as individuals now. You are responsible for your ascension. You are responsible for your rise out of matter. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter what gender you are, it doesn't matter what sexuality you are, it doesn't matter whatever all these labels are. You are responsible for your ascent to heaven. You are responsible for your spiritualization out of this plane. You are responsible for your exit off of the wheel of samsara, or the wheel of karma. You are responsible for that. And with the incarnation of Christ and through the mystery of Golgotha, we learn that it is from that point on the earth forward that every individual can liberate themselves. So we still have blood memory. We still have that, but we've mastered that. And we no longer have to function in a tribal state. That's what it means by being free and being able to be an individual. That's what America was essentially supposed to be founded in. It's the individual, and there's nothing holding you back now but yourself. Everybody has the power within them, which is the Christ essence within their own heart that was given during the mystery of Golgotha or the crucifixion. That essence that now exists within our heart is the power that we use to transform ourselves out of matter. It's the impulse that we now can use to transform ourselves out of matter. Okay? We didn't have that impulse before. It wasn't time yet. So we were functioning in a different way. And there's a great desire to function in a tribal way. But you still see people that are stuck in that materialization impulse, which manifests as intense tribalism. You see it with politics too. People are functioning as a tribe because they're not really grasping what it means to be an individual. They may understand the concept of individuality. Maybe people don't. A lot of people think individuality is completely toxic because they don't realize that true individuality is based in love, because that's what we are. And that's the first door to understanding and working with your individuality is the Christ impulse, which is love. So there is no real understanding of individuality unless you embrace love, unless you embrace that Christ impulse within you. So there are a lot of people that are, again, trapped in that prior phase, which is complete and total tribalism, not understanding that they can exist as an individual. And this is also why in sort of darker magical traditions, it's all based in hierarchies. They work in a complete hierarchical format, not even able to use intuition or anything like that. It's just a hierarchy. It's just a structure. And it has to be for them because it's tribalism. So as soon as we have that incarnation of Christ, that is the midpoint of our planetary development. The sun comes close to the earth and enters the earth through Christ. And that gives us the ability to truly function as an individual and rise out of this planet, or resurrect out of this planet as an individual. That is the core and heart of the spiritualization arc, is individuality. So it's understanding your holy individuality, and understanding that everything is now within you. Before, when we're more tribal, we didn't understand that everything was within us. And so tribalism is also this hangover of the materialization phase. This is also why when you look at the esoterica of the Nazis, which I cover in Mars Mysteries, which is it's really beyond the Third Reich, and it really traces back to this impulse of spiritual materialism, or of Ahriman, or of Belial, where it's too materially oriented, and there's no Christ impulse in it of transformation. It's just so materialistically oriented, thinking that it's spiritual, but it's old. It's not modernized. It's not full of that transformational spark. And so we can see it manifest for a period with the Third Reich and through the Thule Society, but that still exists today, right? And so in that tradition, we also see that real obsession with eugenics and this idea of the Aryan race, or the that one race is better than the other. These ideas, this is very much spiritual materialism. It is spiritual materialism applied to the human being, where they think that the physical form is the indicator of somebody's spiritual worth. And of course, they create it around how they look and how they appear in their ideals. But that's just spiritual materialism, because tell you what, it doesn't matter what your form is. Anybody can now ascend. Anybody can rise. Everybody can rise. It doesn't matter what you look like. Like, this is, it's getting to the point. It's bizarre to think that. It's bizarre to think that if you have a certain body or a certain form, you're more spiritually valuable than somebody else. In our day and age, this is ridiculous. Every single person has the capacity now to evolve out of this plane. Okay? Before, we all didn't have that. It's not like some people did and some people didn't know. The whole planet didn't have that impulse until the incarnation of Christ, which represented a much larger transformation in our solar system and on our planet that the man was just embodying for us. So I really have to go into detail about this because there is so much weird tribalism, I think, going on, and it is based in genetic engineering and trying to control the form. It's based in, there's a lot of people who believe in eugenics and destroying certain populations that they deem unworthy. Like, we are getting into some weird, dark stuff that is straight from Atlantis, that is straight from being caught in this materialization impulse, where people are only working upon the material plane, thinking that it's going to get a spiritual result, and it won't. It's just dark. So I hope that makes sense. The incarnation of Christ removed tribalism, and it removed the intense focus on blood memory. And it allowed that Christ essence to enter everybody's blood, no matter where you are, who you are. Once that happened, we all had the ability to commune with heaven and even rise out of our bodies through Christ's blood entering the earth and transforming our own blood system. This is one of the biggest mysteries that we need to understand, is that changed our blood. It gave us the ability to continue to change our blood. It gave us the impulse to change our blood. So we no longer have to rely so much on blood memory to connect with spirit. Again, we still do. You still have your blood memory. It's not like it doesn't exist. It's not like it's not valuable. I know people are very sensitive about that. But it's just that it's different now, since the incarnation of Christ has changed our ability to work upon ourselves through our blood. It's changed. It allows us the etherization of our blood into a spiritual. It allows us to etherize our blood so that we rise into a spiritual plane. We did not have that before. It was about, for a while there, was just about the preservation of blood memory so you could commune with the spiritual beings clearly. I hope this makes sense. I know it's a very sensitive topic. I can go into it deeper in another lecture if you guys want, but just really trying to highlight the difference between a period of time where we were trying to preserve our blood memory so that we could commune with higher worlds properly. And that was because of the kind of condition that the earth and cosmos was in, that humanity was in. It was not like it is now. And I'm contrasting that to after the incarnation of Christ, where we now have the ability to, through the etherization of our blood with Christ, rise. So we're in a completely different condition. So I hope that's clear. Boy, oh boy, are there a lot of people, though, that just that's not understood. They don't believe in that. They think it's crap. It makes them uncomfortable, probably because of a lot of weird dogmatic stuff that said they're just blocked off from it or whatever. And they're stuck in the material world. They're stuck in thinking that the more material things they have, or the more they can change their form, the more joy and peace they're going to have. Well, joy and peace and all of that it comes through the integration of spirit and Christ in our form. It's not going to come through anything material. And that extreme desire to preserve or become tribal is an harmonic impulse. It's not an evolutionary impulse. The evolutionary impulse is the Christ impulse, which is the solar impulse, personified. That's one way to look at it. Okay. Another mindset that is very common when somebody is trapped in that materialization arc is this obsession with always thinking about what they're going to get, what they're going to manifest. Obsession with what am I manifesting? What is basically materializing around me? So it's sort of like they're always doing this process, and I'm really bad for this, maybe you are too, where it's like, if I do X, then I can have Y, or then Y can happen. So you're always doing that equation of what you're going to get or what's going to materialize here, or how can I get this material thing? How can I get that thing? Or even it could even be like just control over your life, complete control over your life. Like, how do I get this job? How do I get this opportunity? How do I get this relationship? When I get this, I'm then going to be happy. And what's happening is you're really just looking at the material plane as though it's like the container for your happiness and your evolution or your joy. And you're obsessed with how you can just get these experiences or material objects so that you can be happy or finally be free enough to spiritually evolve, or whatever it is we tell ourselves. So this idea that if I do this, then I get that, or if I do this, then that will happen, then that will happen. That is actually also very, very connected into the materialist impulse, because it's our mind still associating our value, our power, our happiness, our spiritualness with the material plane. And really what's being required in this epoch is something completely different. We're actually challenged to live differently, in that we are meant to connect in with our heart and live our purpose and watch our life materialize around us and enter into it from love and respond with love and create from a completely higher place. We're meant to work with what manifests in our life with love, to serve, and understand that at this point in human development and planetary development, what happens in your life is not a mistake. It's not it's not something that you have to control. It's something that with love you work upon. With love you understand. With Christ you understand. Does that make sense? So the difference is like frantically attending manifestation workshops and, oh my God, I got to manifest all the money, and I got to go on the vacation, and I got to do the things, and I got to have the body, and I got to manifest all of this stuff, because that's what life is about. It's about what I create here. And it's really can be kind of a trap, because in reality, we should really be drawing our focus inward and aligning ourselves with God and with Christ and with the mind of God, with the mind of Christ, and making sure that our thoughts and actions and will is in line with that. So the real focus is actually inner work, not outer experience. And through that, we realize that the world changes and we change. Now, I'm not trying to say that you should be irresponsible. I'm not trying to say that you should sell every possession that you have and go live in a monastery. No, you have to be active in your life. You have to be alive. But you have to be that conscious creator, knowing that it's not about the stuff. It's not about physical perfection. It's not about having everything that you want, because oftentimes that really takes all of your energy and just kind of focuses you in this material plane. It's really about spending more time making sure that you're in your heart, that you are aligned with your Christ consciousness, that you are expressing your Christ consciousness. And seeing how just being in that way transforms you. Seeing how that is the joy that you've always been searching for. And you can still do all the things. You can still take vacations. You can still like physicality and like beauty, and you can still buy things. It's not a complete divorce from the material plane. I'm not preaching extremes. I'm preaching slow metamorphosis and shifts, life after life after life, where we are now drawing inward and aligning with Christ, and having that really save us from ourselves, from the prior impulse of intense materialization, materialism, and this almost automatic focus and religion that we have, focusing on the external plane, the external world, to the point where if an individual is to stay in the materialization impulse, what ends up happening is they completely materialize the spiritual evolution of themselves. They make it a machine. You know, the etheric cords that uplift you into your higher form become tubes of a machine. You know, all sorts of deeply esoteric changes that happen to our body to spiritualize turn into the bizarre technocratic religion of materialism that we see today. It is much bigger than what we think. And so the impulse is to go inward now. You know, the kingdom of heaven is within. Everything is now within. And we work upon ourselves to evolve. And this is actually what shifts the planet. It's what shifts us. It is what is necessary. Okay? So we're not wanting to fall into always focusing on what we can receive or what we can gain, always doing that equation in our mind, like, what can I get from this? What can I gain from this? How can this move me forward? How can this help me? And rather behaving from the place of service and love, and coming into any situation and being that the best that you possibly can. And knowing that that alchemy is enough to change any situation in your life to where it should be, even if you've got to go through the mud for a while because you don't deeply understand something. But understanding that even if you're in the mud or even if you're in the dark night, that you're learning and that there's something leaving you when you're doing that, right? That life isn't It's not a Luciferian adventure where everything is pleasure, everything is joy all the time, everything has to be physically satisfying, or everything has to be beautiful, everything has to be, void of any negativity or pain. That's not where we are. So that will also force us. That's how that Luciferic impulse forces us into the harmonic impulse. That's how that Luciferian impulse can force us into the materialization impulse too much, by avoiding pain, avoiding darkness, avoiding shadow, that eventually you just fall into it without control and awareness. Does that make sense? So you have to link the heart and mind to Christ. And another one that can be another one that can be challenging is always wanting material and earthly wealth, or material acknowledgement, always wanting to be acknowledged for what you think you are, who you are, whatever that is. That can also be a trap as well, because that's that desire to exist in the material plane a certain way. And in reality, we want to highlight just the power of expressing yourself rather than the always being acknowledged. So in other words, the real power in the spiritualization phase that we're in now is purely expressing who you are. It is connecting in with your heart and your soul and feeling what you're passionate about, feeling what you feel your purpose is, and it is expressing it, it is building it, it is doing it. And it is, when you get to that also a higher point, offering it in service. That is the real purpose, not focusing on how can I be acknowledged, how can I be at the top of my field, how can I be the best, how can I take my life purpose or my gift and dominate others, or be in a powerful position in society. That's not a good mindset to be in. We want to be in the position where the most powerful and important thing you can do is to discover yourself and to lovingly give that to the world in service. And that is the most powerful thing to do. But obviously, that is not what we're taught, because so much of the planet is still in that materialistic impulse and feels like we have to live parasitically. That's another thing about the materialization impulse, is that you become a parasite because you don't understand that you can get your power and regeneration from inside of you through healing yourself and through essentially radiating Christ essence, which is the source of all regeneration and evolution. It is the transformational impulse, which is the life impulse, right? So there isn't an understanding that that's what's needed. And so it's just this idea that you have to suck on other people for life. You have to parasitically attach to people and live off of them. Look at all the elites in society that have spent their entire lives, and generations of them, pathetically setting up systems on the earth where they can just parasitically suck off of humanity and live off of humanity like a parasite. That's not a powerful place to be. You're not a powerful person if you literally have to attach to people and suck them dry. You're not a powerful person. You are, by definition, the weakest group of people. You're the weakest person because you can't survive on your own. You have to set up these sick systems where you are a parasite. This is what happens, though, when you become too trapped in the material plane and you don't have that ability to spiritualize and do alchemy, internal alchemy, where you're transforming your energy and you're getting that cycle going in your system. When you become too materialistic, when you become too materialized, when that impulse is too powerful in you, it's not that you couldn't do it. It's not that it wasn't available to you. It's that certain people have arranged their whole consciousness, probably intergenerationally too, where they can't even sense the spiritual planes. They can't even sense the Christ impulse within them. They don't even know it's there. They're just trapped in this material impulse, which now manifests as complete parasitism. But it's not just elite groups that have established this sick way of existing. It's also random people. A lot of people function through vampirism, through energy vampirism. I'm sure you guys can think of a few people in your mind who are energy vampires or who have a huge desire to live codependently. And all of this comes from, it is a vestige of the Atlantean and Lemurian condition when humanity was naturally interconnected. And, Rudolf Steiner says that we had a natural interconnectivity or a natural clairvoyance. And so there was this idea of shared energy. There was this idea of being able to directly affect one another energetically. And things couldn't even really get that dark until the middle to the end of the Atlantean epoch. So a lot of the energy exchanges were great. So as soon as you see Atlantis fall, and then we start to come into the post-Atlantean epoch, we get the incarnation of Christ. All of those patterns don't work anymore. Those impulses, those ways of being, they don't work anymore because we have now, as a planet and human, metamorphosed into a self-sufficient form. Okay, so I hope this is really clear. The last thing that I'll say here is that the concept of the eighth sphere does come into play, whereas if certain streams of humanity are not able to accept the challenge of the epoch, which is the Christ impulse and the spiritualization of man out of matter, then what ends up happening is that energy goes into something called the eighth sphere. And I will link that below. My lecture's on that below, because that is when the energy is just too fragmented and there's no gravity of the I developed in order to create that spiritual movement into a higher sphere. It kind of all goes into a lower sphere. Okay, and I want to mention that because that's ultimately where that materialization impulse leads humanity, is into this eighth sphere. It keeps compressing and compressing and compressing part of the earth consciousness, and whatever human beings are still functioning in that, it compresses it into a separate sphere, and another sphere separates and turns into, in anthroposophy, new Jupiter. In the New Age, this is known as the new Earth. So there is a point in human development and in the development of the Earth where these two lineages will be separated. The Christ impulse and the Antichrist impulse they do have their own gravity, and it will cause the separation of worlds in a form of mitosis, where you get a higher earth and a lower earth. So if you cannot release the patterns of the prior epochs, which is materialization, and you want to stay in that materialization impulse, that materialization religion that we've been talking about in 2 lectures now, more than that, but this 2-part lecture, then that ends up binding you to the 8th sphere. Okay. The other higher sphere is literally the result of us spiritualizing ourselves with the planet and the Christ impulse into a higher form, which again is symbolized by Christ rising from the tomb of matter, which is us rising from our tomb of matter, which is our physical form in our body. But we spiritualize ourselves out of it through our own work. And of course, this ideology of the 8th sphere or of the materialization impulse is a death cult. That's one way that you can look at it. It is the obsession with the death impulse. It is becoming the death impulse. And this is why, so many people that get caught up in this, their mind degenerates to the point where they do start to do very degenerate things like worship death. And you can see that they are a death cult. I'm not going to get into it, but this is also the Antichrist impulse. Okay? Because if we don't understand the Christ impulse and its role in our life and in the solar system, then it's sort of like we rot or we die or we dissolve, if that makes sense. So the Antichrist impulse is also associated with degeneration and rotting and death by attaching too much to the past impulse, that, you know, which for us is materialization and not spiritualizing. Okay, I hope this is making sense. So let me just take some time and I'm going to summarize the different mindsets that can happen when we become stuck in the materialization impulse. So ultimately, if we're in this impulse, we can get stuck in it and we can get drawn down into the devolutionary timeline or the devolutionary evolution the devolutionary stream. You can see it as a timeline of humanity, but you can also just see it as an impulse or a stream that is degradation, that is devolution. Okay, so if you stay trapped in that materialization impulse, it's going to lead to devolution, degeneration, the eighth sphere. And so this can lead to, there are symptoms of this which can lead to these kinds of thoughts, which is, the first one was in our last lecture we started with, and it is that if it manifests, it must be real, it must be true. So the idea that everything around you is perfect and there's no desire, there's no understanding of having to enter into your life as the creator. There's, you know, you have to discern the world around you. You have to understand that you're an individual and act as such. The releasing of tribal consciousness and thinking as a group, and also wanting higher individualities to speak for you and do things for you. This is also a vestige of the Atlantean era, where we had great kings and great masters and great individualities that were from higher spheres that would lead society and lead humanity. We don't have that on the planet in the same way. We're human. And during that time, the planet was less dense and was overlapping with certain higher spheres, allowing genuinely angelic people to be here and initiating us. That doesn't exist in that way anymore. You are an individual. You have to learn discernment. Everybody has to learn discernment. We can no longer rest on our laurels in tribes waiting for leaders to fix things for us. That is a direct vestige of the prior epoch, when humanity did not have an I. Humanity was not an individual and could not discern anything. And so we had to be led by these higher beings. And then by the midway through Atlantis, we began to get our mind. And we began to get that individuality. But before that, we did depend on leaders, and they were angelic individuals. And it's because we're not able to get past that we have large portions of the population that are projecting that prior phase of existence. And they're like, oh my gosh, well, you know, I think that this leader is great, and the tribalism in politics, and believing that you have to put up with certain, it's just we're in a different phase where it's really about every individual learning discernment, developing their individuality, and understanding that that's not really the role of leaders anymore, if that makes sense. I've been talking for a long time. So the next thing is the idea that you must create forms to incarnate into. I covered this in the last lecture. The idea that you have to create a form to incarnate into is a vestige of the materialization arc. Our form is created. Okay, we don't have to create the form anymore. We are now deeply entrenched in matter. We're now completely physicalized, and we're now spiritualizing. We're spiritualizing out of matter with this form. We're spiritualizing this form over thousands of years out of matter. It's also called etherization. There is no need to create forms. There's no need to create cyborgs to incarnate into. There's no need to create the weird forms so the demons can incarnate. This is no. This is a no. Know what you're looking at and know the phase that you're in. Okay? And there's also no need to go into genetic engineering and bizarre eugenics schemes and intelligent design, because we're not here to play God. We are here to understand God, and we're here to understand the forms and the patterns of forms that are going to manifest, and work upon them and work with them in love. Whatever we have, whatever manifests here, we work upon with love to transform. First within ourselves and then in the world. Not backwards. We're not working upon things in the world hoping that it will create a better spiritual result. That's inverted. And of course, understanding, lastly, that we are here to serve, and we are here to figure out what our purpose is, what we love to do, and give it to the world. And that is actually the action that creates a higher society. You can't force people to be spiritual. You can't force people to love one another. You can't force people to serve one another. You can't force people with government to heal one another. You can't legislate that. You can't legislate a higher society. You can't legislate utopia. Anybody who tells you that you can is lying to you. The only thing that can create a higher society is when everybody understands Christ within themselves. And when people understand what the Christ impulse is and who Christ is. That is what causes spiritualization, which is ultimately leads to the creation of a higher society. You can't legislate it. You can't force people. People have to understand that. People have to come to that understanding and act it out. And that is what then creates a higher society, a more compassionate one. So this is where our focus should be. Not on all of the external focuses and material things. It's important for sure. I'm not saying withdraw from important discussions about the economy or about politics, but we have to understand where the real impetus of change is, which is spiritual, which is inward, and begin to create the right structure so that we can do that. Okay, which begins inside each and every one of us. All right. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm so glad to be with you. Don't forget to hit that like button, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. I also have a private membership program where I do live Q&As, and I cover all of these topics, often in much more detail than I can here on YouTube. So if you want to support my work, if you like this content, go ahead and join. You can get, at least 6 or 7 hours of extra content a month. And I could answer your question. If you don't want to do that, I also accept donations, and that just helps me keep the lights on over here. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. As always, all my love your way, and I will see you in our next chat.